So here we are in the Zoological Museum in Cambridge, and it's here that lots of the objects or the animals that Darwin came back from the Galapagos Islands with are kept. Of course, many are also in the Natural History Museum in London. But just over my shoulder down there are the most famous animals that Darwin came back with, and those are the finches. And it was the different beaks of the finches which have become the iconic symbol for his theory of natural selection. So let's just indulge a moment on the theory, the explosive theory, the revolutionary theory which Darwin brought to the world. What is the theory of natural selection? And why is it so significant for human culture and human society? Why was it so explosive? Because of course he's a biologist, but his theory of biology would have this explosive impact right across all fields of human inquiry and all fields of human culture and so on. So if we zoom in on those finches, the thing is that they had different beaks, and those different beaks were adapted to the different islands of the Galapagos on which they lived. And by having a beak that was more successfully adapted to the environment, it of course increases the chances that you're going to live longer because you're going to eat more food, more seeds. And by living longer, there's a higher chance that you're going to pass on the genes that you have. Okay, we don't know about genetics and is not yet part of Darwin's vocabulary, but there was an advantage which was passed on to future generations. And so species are going to shift over time according to their environment. And this theory, this biological theory, had a huge impact for a number of reasons. Number one, you now have a natural world which is essentially competitive. Now, if you think back to those little models of giraffes and zebras and hippos, those plastic Playmobil ones, designed, let's say, in God's workshop and static in the world, they don't have to compete to survive. They just have to eat. Now, by changing the landscape of the natural landscape into one of survival, of competition, Darwin was essentially making the world out there into, let's say, a place which was red in tooth and claw. This phrase from Tennyson, which we'll come to in the next set of videos, nature being red in tooth and claw, nature being essentially violent and competitive, doesn't sit very comfortably with a God who is good. Imagine me as a dad. I say to my kids, okay, just go out and play in the garden for a while. I'm going to make the dinner. And I give them a football to play with. And then I call them in for dinner half an hour later. That's perfectly okay. That's like being a good dad. But by contrast, if I said to them, okay, kids, go outside and play in the garden. I'll see you in half an hour for dinner. But I gave them a chainsaw instead, just to see which one would come back alive in half an hour. That doesn't rank very highly in the good parenting skills catalogue. So if God is going to design the universe, it doesn't seem very appropriate that he designs it in a way which is red in tooth and claw. It doesn't fit very well with a God who is good, a God who is loving, a God that sends his son Jesus into the world in meekness and humility. It's kind of rather the opposite. Secondly, it also undermined the Bible, because the story of creation in Genesis, in the first book, in the world was made in 6 days, and then on the seventh day he rested. Well, Darwin's theory of evolution doesn't have things in such a simple, concrete way. You have creation being done over millions of years. Thirdly, it also makes creation blind. The process of anything coming into existence or dropping out of existence is not because of some intelligence, it's not because of some purposefulness, it's not because there's a God has thought about it and made it happen. In evolution, everything happens by blind chance. Again, if you go back to genetics, when things are in the natural world, they're fighting for survival, and it's the random shaking of the bag of genetics which enables an animal to have a small advantage over its peers, over its competitors. But the only reason to have that advantage is a genetic mutation. Okay, 99% of the time, those genetic mutations are negative. 99%, if you have a genetic mutation, you don't tend to live longer. But sometimes it's good. Sometimes it gives you an advantage. But that mutation is not planned. It's not organized. It's not the product of some deliberation of some intelligent being. It's just happened by chance. So by having nature as being random, that again doesn't fit squarely with the world order that Darwin was born into, a world order in which you have biblical truths, church truths, and a creation which is settled and stable. So you add all this up and you have a biological theory which is going to rip through culture. And perhaps in the sharpest way now for us, what it does is it drags human identity into the world of the animal. Of course, not long after Darwin's theory of evolution, you had the case of Jack the Ripper going around London and killing women in the most brutal, savage ways. And this Jekyll and Hyde, this irrational part of man, with Darwinian theory, we can understand it. Well, we're just part of the animal kingdom. We're no more dignified or noble than the apes or the monkeys, or ultimately the fish, the barnacles, and the beetles. So human identity was dragged down to this animal level. We were no longer this noble final act of creation. We were no longer the summit of God's work. And so this, especially this, had profound implications for how we understand ourselves as humans, which would be explored, of course, later by Freud and by Nietzsche and so on. So one biological theory, a simple theory in a way, all great science is simple, a simple theory about how an advantage leads to survival, leads to children, and leads eventually to the changing of a species. And yet this theory had massive cultural, social, and political implications. And it's this changing of the background landscape to human life and to human culture which leads us on to the final set of videos in this series. Because Tennyson is going to be born into this world which has become destabilized by science, which has become destabilized by a theory of evolution. Because Tennyson, he's going to suffer personal tragedy in his life, the death of his best friend. And this personal tragedy is going to rock his world. It's going to de-anchor him. It's going to cut loose the normal, traditional sense of meaning that he has. And it's going to force him into a lot of questioning about meaning, about identity, about purpose. And so in the case of Tennyson, his personal life, the tragedy of his personal life, is going to be reflected in the background cultural life of Victorian England. So Tennyson is going to indulge this parallel between personal tragedy and, let's say, social tragedy. This Darwinian evolutionary theory had a profoundly destabilizing effect on the way in which people understood human identity, human meaning, human purpose. And his poem, In Memoriam, is going to be just the most beautiful work of art which captures all those things and brings it together.